Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to see some new faces and some familiar faces, and it's great to see everybody and be together, even if we're still virtual. For those who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Schwalmberg, and I sit on the Women in Finance Charter Board, representing the FinTech, SME, and other signatory group. We are a large and diverse group of companies that are fintechs or SMEs that are connected within the financial services sector. And I know this morning we are also joined by Women in Finance Charter signatories from other signatory groups. And so welcome to our meeting, welcome to our community, and we're happy to have representation across the charter this morning. So thank you so much. We are coming together to discuss an incredibly important topic. It's been called the Great Recession. It's been called the Great That's coming next. It's Great Resignation, the Great Attrition. Where either people in our industry are feeling it either as candidates or as employers. And so we're joined this morning by three experts in their fields who are going to walk us through what's going on, why it's happened, and what can we expect in the future, and how we as institutions can adapt to it. So we have Kirsty Pinniger, the Executive Director of Bruin Financial, Tracy Fletcher, the Managing Director of CF Recruitment, and Mark Freed, the CEO of E2W and Men for Inclusion. So we'll hand over to the candidates, who will give them a brief bio of themselves, and then we'll go back and they will discuss the key points of, they've each prepared key points that they find to be incredibly relevant for what's going on now. And then at the end, we will open it up to questions, and given pretty much, looking at our numbers, we may be able to just have everyone just raise their hand. If it seems like it's getting a little bit too challenging, we'll have everybody put questions in the chat box. But at the same point, if you have comments or questions during the presentation, please do feel free, and we'll pick them up as we go along. So again, thank you so much. And without further ado, I'll hand to Tracy.
Hi everybody, good morning. So I think we're just going to do bios first, and then I'm going to pick up and start the kind of process. So so I have a recruitment company. We're a small niche company that specialises in the recruitment of professionals into financial services across the industry. My background is banking, so I worked for 20 years for HSBC in various positions in the north of England and in London. And a lot of what I did was around operational risk, but also I managed very, very large teams, and therefore I spent my life recruiting. So I've got kind of a fairly good understanding of what it feels like to recruit in a big bank, also what it feels like to be a woman working in financial services. So in addition to that, I do quite a lot of work with the Treasury. Thank you, Jennifer, for involving me in that. Much appreciated. Big advocate of supporting women in their career journey in financial services. I'm also a volunteer coach and trustee of a charity called SmartWorks, which some of you might have heard of, and we're on a mission to support women getting back into employment from often very difficult circumstances and backgrounds. So we provide interview clothing and coaching to women who may have been in the prison system, they may have been homeless, they could be have had a significant amount of time at home bringing their children up, lots of very different circumstances. So that again is something that's very important and close to my heart. Mark.
Thank you. Hi everybody, good morning. As you can see, my name is Mark Freed. My journey, 25 years ago, I was working at Credit Suisse in a leadership role, heading up a technology company that they owned. Whilst I was there, I met a lovely woman who was also on the leadership team, who I fell in love with, and we married. That's the love story. What happened next is an amazing journey. My career took off. I was traveling all over the world. I was never at home. And frankly, I wasn't being the type of husband or the type of father I wanted to be to my children. Tina, her career had taken a typical route. She had taken a career break, was looking to get back into work, but didn't want to get back into a career like mine. Neither of it, we knew there was somewhere in the middle that we needed to meet, but we couldn't find that middle. So we created it ourselves and launched a company called E2W. For the last 20 years, we've focused all of our energy and our efforts on supporting and helping women working in financial services to succeed, flourish, and continue in their careers. We've built up a large community. Having built up that community, we've started working and launched a recruitment business, which gives our clients access to an amazing talent pool of female talent. We only work with firms who are committed to diversity, who are committed to providing the type of workplaces that enable our members to succeed and flourish. Along the way, we helped the government, the Treasury, roll out and launch the Women in Finance Charter, and recently recognizing that progress is slow, and some of the blockers are about straight white guys like me not getting involved in diversity and inclusion, have launched Men for Inclusion.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsty Pinniger. My story is not that exciting. To be honest, I don't have any industry experience. My experience is recruitment through and through. I went into financial services recruitment after I graduated from university. I was probably one of the only people that I've ever come across who knew they wanted to do recruitment straight out of university. So I've always focused on investment management. I've worked my way up to a senior director level within the Bruin business. I was actually one of the original founders of our asset management business. And I run various teams across London covering operations, middle office, and I personally recruit into the investments and ESG space. I also head up our European offering, so we have teams across Dublin, Paris, Frankfurt, covering the continental Europe space. And I guess what brings me here today is I am a very passionate believer in DE&I within the recruitment process. I have 2 young children, and when I came back from my first maternity leave, I felt like a complete fish out of water, to be completely honest with you. I was the only one who was working part-time within the business. I still am the only person at Bruin doing part-time work as a fee earner. And I just remember thinking, if this is how I feel returning to a company that I've been with for 7 years, God only knows what somebody who's been out of the industry feels like coming back in or trying to come back into the industry as a working mum. So that led me to approach the Diversity Project returners work stream. So I'm an active member of that, and I advise a lot of our clients around returner policies, returner programs, and their DE&I strategy. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. I really believe there is a place for returners in the market. So yeah, part-time working mum, manager, and yeah, big believer in the D&I process. So really, really pleased to see everyone here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Kirsty. So, and I think you deserve your place on that panel because that, that's such relevant experience that you're kind of, experiencing at the moment. So I just want to put this into context for everybody. Why are we here? What is it that's happening at the moment that we felt this was a really important topic? So a couple of stats, not many. So I think there was 4.5 million people last year changed jobs. And there has been a study early this year that suggests that 30% of the workforce in the UK are thinking about changing jobs this year. So that's fairly significant numbers. And I guess the context, and I've reflected a lot about what's happened, and as my fellow panelists, we speak with candidates a lot. So why is it so difficult, and why are we in such a candidate-led market at the moment? It's because we're in a perfect storm. So people change jobs because they have their own light bulb moment, and that could be that something's happened to them personally. It could be that they have their company doesn't support them. It could be financial, but it happens individually, and it happens, it's a trickle, isn't it, throughout the year. But all of a sudden, the pandemic has caused this perfect storm, because the pandemic has brought everybody's thought process into relief at the same time. So people have reevaluated their life over this pandemic because it's focused everybody's attention. And so the things I'm talking about is all of a sudden people are working remotely. So people have worked remotely for a good chunk of time, which means that their usual social interactions at work have ceased. So if someone has made do with a job because the social life was good, their colleagues were great, and that has masked the fact that their jobs are banal, or they don't enjoy them, or it's stressful, and all that other frill has been taken away, and they're left with the fact that they're not compatible with their job. So that's one thing. Furloughing has highlighted some employers that haven't actually looked after their staff as well, or even with the remote working. If it's psychologically very difficult to go from working in a big kind of busy environment to then being on your own all the time. And if the employers haven't worked out how to keep a culture going in a remote working environment, that's made people think about it. Lots of, I mean, I'm not saying that these are, some of this would have had to happen, wouldn't it? We can't say that all this, we could change it, because I think some of it just was inevitable. But, some companies obviously couldn't pay bonuses, or there wasn't business development, wasn't happening. So bonuses weren't being generated, pay freezes, all those things, perfect storm. Usually you have companies recruiting, no recruitment happening whatsoever. Investors not investing in new companies, so no new companies coming in. So all this has happened that's created this this situation where you've got employees not being particularly as engaged with their companies, and all of a sudden the companies who haven't been recruiting for 2 years all of a sudden realizing they've got massive holes in their infrastructure and they need people. So that's kind of the context, and there'll be loads more and reasons, and I'm sure Mark and Kirsty have got lots to add to that as well. But what I want to kind of concentrate on in this regard is what the candidate experience is feeling like at the moment. So because we're in a candidate driven market, it's so unusual, because it's usually the client is in the driving seat. So the client has a job. The market there's been historically loads of redundancies. So candidates are, there aren't as many jobs as there are candidates. But what we're in a situation now where there's loads of jobs and candidates are making different decisions for different reasons, and they want different outcomes because of what they've experienced over the last couple of years. So the first time in my 15-year career in recruitment, we're in a candidate-driven market, really are, where we have candidates with multiple job offers and are making decisions not just purely based on how much money or what bonuses. So I've just been reflecting. I was reflecting with my team last week about some of the examples of things that just aren't working anymore. And my biggest challenge here will be not to actually name the clients, because that would be very unprofessional, but just to kind of give you some examples of why things aren't necessarily working and when they do work. So one of the things that I think is quite interesting when I've been dealing with some of my bigger clients are how complicated the recruitment process is, and how client focused it is. So I will give you a live example of a candidate process that I'm working with at the moment with senior candidates. So I'm working on a role at the moment where it's senior, it's £120,000 higher. And the individuals in this process are senior and they've got very technical backgrounds. So they're quite exacting as candidates. And my client's process means that these candidates don't even touch the hiring manager, don't get to the hiring manager until they've completed a personality test online and a self video. So they get some questions that they have to answer in a video situation, and they're submitted to the HR function before there is even a conversation with the hiring manager. And that's a client-driven approach, and it's convoluted and it takes time. And my experience is that at the level of seniority I'm dealing with, some of those candidates just say, you know what, that's not going to work for me. I don't feel I need to do I've got a 20-year career. I don't need to justify myself by doing a video interview. I'd like to have a grown-up conversation with the hiring manager. Thank you very much. And the other part of that is that, so it's, the two things that are falling down in my experience at the moment, it's speed and it's communication. Now, the more layers you put into a recruitment process, the longer it's going to take, which is fine if we're in a client-driven market. But in a candidate-driven market where candidates are they are being inundated by calls and approaches, if they are good, then, often the candidates have moved along with another client whilst this clunky client-focused process goes on. So, this to me doesn't feel like a two-way recruitment process. It's all about the client being able to decide whether that candidate's good enough for them, but not the opportunity for the candidate to decide whether culturally this is a great organisation for them to be in. So, and my live example of this would be the difference between the massive difference between types of clients now, where the traditional bigger banks, I'm not saying it is just bigger banks, but the bigger corporate organisations that have a good brand and a reputation that is delivered by their brand, are actually starting to lose out now because they're not fleet of foot. So we had a situation where a really great candidate came to us, had been made redundant from a senior position, and had lots of really excellent fintech experience, which is something that everybody's craving at the moment. Digitization, fintech experience, anything that involves kind of technology. And we took the decision, we don't do it very often, but we took the decision to spec this candidate to a number of organizations. So we spec'd the candidate to a big bank and 3 smaller organizations. And by the time the big bank had come back to us with actually, this CV is quite interesting. The candidate had 3 interviews and a job offer and had been accepted by the other company. So that's kind of, that's a really good example of how the process needs to be quicker and less convoluted because that's the market we're in. The other big bugbear at the moment is the communication piece. So if we're talking about a candidate experience, so not all candidates get jobs, do they? But all candidates need to be kept in the loop in the process. So we've had a candidate whose CV we sent on the 10th of January to a client, and the interview happened on the 12th of January, which was brilliant. So we were just like, this is great. And on the 14th of February, we chased again for feedback about the candidate. So the candidate had been in process, had an interview. We couldn't get any feedback from the candidate about the candidate interview. When we chased it again on the 14th of February, the candidate was automatically rejected off the portal shortlist. So we knew at that point the candidate hadn't been successful in their interview, but we still haven't been able to get feedback as to why that candidate hadn't been successful. So that as an experience for the candidate is really poor, and that person's experience of potentially wanting to go work at for that employer will be diminished massively because it's not a great experience, and it doesn't help. It's not helpful at all. So they're just kind of two or three examples of how we need to look at things differently in order to be able to attract candidates and keep them in a process and stop them falling out. And I don't think it's enough anymore just to be able to sit on your brand and say, well, we're a great brand and therefore the candidates should be really grateful that we're giving them an opportunity. So that's me kind of starting off. So about candidate experience. So and I'm going to give the opportunity now for Mark to pick up the mantle, if that's all right. If anybody got any questions so far.
Tracy, thank you. I share your experiences every day, and certainly, as an industry and everybody on this call, we need to give a much better candidate experience than we do. A few things from me, a few tips, a few thoughts. I think first of all, everybody on this call presumably has signed the Women in Finance Charter and made certain commitments. Those commitments are going to be made in part by all of us through recruitment. So when we go out and recruit, I think the first thing we need as an intent from the hiring manager and from the recruitment team and everybody involved in the recruitment team to find female candidates, to find those candidates right up front. We need to do that by being radical in the way we think about recruitment. We can't do things in the same old way and expect different results. Most of our recruitment processes, particularly in larger firms, have been set up with time and cost of hire as a high priority. We need to change that if we're going to meet our commitments to the Charter and make sure that diversity and diverse hires are made a high priority. You don't go looking for gold in a coal mine. If you're looking for unique resource, you need to go and look for it in different places and work in different ways to find it. People often talk to me about, but I'm looking for the best person for the job. I'd hit back at that and say, if you've got 10, 30-something-year-old white straight men in a team, the best hire isn't another 30-year-old straight white man for that role. And you need to go out and actively find those diverse candidates. But of course, culture matters. There's no point in bringing a female into that team of 10 white straight men. If she's not going to succeed, she's not going to flourish, and she's going to leave quite shortly after she joins. So we need to worry about culture. We work in a market where for a lot of our roles, the talent pool are 80% men. 20% women. But that 20% is reduced further because we know women are more loyal, they're more risk averse, they're less likely to change jobs, they're more likely to not want to get into the aggressive, poor candidate experience of a recruitment process. And for that reason, we need to work differently. We need to identify who those women are, those 20%, and we need to build relationships with them to approach them properly, not hope that they're going to apply for roles that we've got. I think also we need to ensure, very importantly, we need to ensure we've got a great value proposition. I talk to a lot of, when we're engaging with a new client, we ask them, why should our members come and work here? Why should they come and work for you? And we quite often get what are called maybe the hard benefits. So it's flexible working. We've got a women's network. All of those hard benefits or barriers. Let's take those away. But much more importantly, I think when we're looking at it's what's the culture in this team? What's the culture in this firm? What are the values we believe in? What are the behaviors we expect of our colleagues? How do our female colleagues flourish and succeed and perform in this environment, which is really important.
I've got a question for you, Mark.
Thanks,
so
Tracy.
So in your experience, what's one of your best kind of experiences of creating that culture? So, you know, what kind of things does an employer do that makes it feel like that?
It's interesting. It kind of maybe takes a little bit off of recruitment there, Tracy, but with my Men for Inclusion hat on, you know, we do a lot of work with senior leadership teams and talking about male allyship to firms. And before we do that, we often do a lived experiences of the female colleagues, understanding what they go through on a daily basis. And quite often we hear it's not the big things that are the barriers, it's the everyday sexisms, the everyday accidental sexisms that are faced. It's making assumptions about your career aspirations after you come back from maternity leave. It's interrupting you when you're speaking. It's all of those things, and I can go through a long list, you understand, that make a difference to the lived experiences of female colleagues. Having flexible working may be really, really important to some, and to some men as well. But to ensure that you're going to flourish and succeed, it's the culture. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, no, sorry, I interrupted your flow, but
no, that's all right. No, I had finished, so I'm going to pass over to. Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to pass over to Kirsty now.
Great, thank you both. And yeah, I mean, I agree with absolutely everything you've both said. I'm sort of quietly nodding along there because yeah, I think that is a lived experience at the moment by both recruiters and candidates at the moment. So what I was going to talk to everyone about was some of the trends that I think prospective employers will be facing for the foreseeable time, you know, in this market. And I think, as everyone said, this is definitely the hottest recruitment market that I've seen for about at least 12 years. And it is challenging. I think it's challenging for everyone, but I think some of the things that we will all have to get used to, you know, as recruiting managers or recruiters, is that every candidate at the moment has multiple processes at different clients. And I think that is in part, unfortunately, because we've all become so used to working virtually, you know, that candidates can just pop onto a Zoom call, have a virtual interview. It's really easy. Whereas before, I think candidates maybe had to be a bit more discerning in terms of what they were looking for in a role, and actually really think about whether something was what they wanted to go forward for. Whereas, you know, at the moment, you know, unfortunately, people can just pop onto an interview. So, you know, candidates being approached by agencies, direct teams, you know, they're getting branded adverts thrown at them on LinkedIn as well. So I think the number of opportunities out there and the ability to sort of speak to people, you know, is so much easier than it used to be. Unfortunately, I think when you find your preferred candidate, you will have to be prepared that there will be a counter offer and a buyback scenario. One of the teams that I manage, out of all the offers they had last year, 80% of candidates received a buyback or a counter offer of some description. And whilst obviously, thank God, not every one of them took it, because otherwise we would be pretty bad at our job. You know, it does make it more challenging, and it just means that we're then having to go back to the table to renegotiate a better offer, a better package, which again, then in turn leads into the next trend, which is a much larger than average salary increase on salaries. And I think a lot of clients will say to us, you know, I don't feel I'm getting necessarily the quality or the value for what I'm paying for, but unfortunately, you know, I think due to inflation, salary increases will continue to go up, but also for certain areas that we recruit into, which are very niche, like female investment candidates, ESG, you know, is a hugely hot area for us at the moment. Females into risk, you know, we're seeing easily, you know, a 30% increase on base alone as a starting point before we even discuss comp, buyouts, guarantees, and everything else. So it's just that sort of overall picture of, I guess, sort of increase on base, you know, to even get your sort of your preferred candidate interested in even considering you, you know, as a potential employer. Again, as we've all touched on, increased competition for the same candidates, which I think is, it is also driving up, unfortunately, the time to fill. You know, I think a lot of clients would say that it's taking longer, and I think that is in part because candidates want to see everything that's out there. You know, they are in internal processes, and I think for female candidates, we know that they like to take their time. they like to consider all opportunities. So again, if you're sort of focusing on trying to bring in more female talent, the time to hire, unfortunately, is taking longer. And I think that unfortunately the biggest negative trend that we are seeing at the moment is that less women are being hired for the roles. And I think it's odd on the one hand because we know there are more roles out there than ever before, but I think the speed at which the market moves, it doesn't favor the female candidate experience, in my opinion. I think a lot of firms say to us, this role's been live for ages, I just need CVs by next week. And if we're really going to find something quite niche, or someone quite niche, and she might be a passive job seeker, the client isn't giving us the time to actually say, well, I think we need to take a little bit longer, look at this slightly differently. So I think those are the sort of overall arching trends that I think we'll continue to see for the foreseeable future. And then I think leading into that, why are clients not getting their desired candidates, and what can they do to sort of overcome that? So the sheer volume of jobs in the market is probably the biggest challenge facing companies at the moment, because I think recruitment processes are very unmanageable for both an internal TA team and the business as a whole. I think hiring managers have been trying to get by with less. So, recruiting is a full-time job, hence why we have recruiters. And clients often tell us that they are struggling with that, and the TA teams are struggling, with their own processes, and they're managing the process with agencies as well. And so, there's that overall picture of a bit of a negative experience for candidates, absolutely. But I think the bigger issue is that the recruitment market becomes very reactive as opposed to sort of more strategic. So again, when we're thinking about how do you attract more females to the industry, into the market as a whole, a reactive recruitment market just doesn't favour, unfortunately, female candidates or diverse candidates, because it's that sort of, I need this person yesterday. And unfortunately, if you then look at the makeup of the team, it is white, male, straight, middle, sort of 30 years old, and it's not bringing anything different to the table. So again, a slightly quieter recruitment market allows firms to just sort of think a bit more around their sort of strategy for pipelining of talent. Actually, is there a more junior option internally that we could coach and mentor through into that bigger role, and then look to hire someone more junior to bring in more diverse talent at the junior end, which I think is really, really important. I think one of the other challenges at the moment for companies is the mixed message around jobs. I think if a role's been out directly for a number of months and there are multiple rejections on an offer, or the candidate experience at that, candidates have interviewed at a firm previously and not had any feedback, the message in the market is very negative, unfortunately. And then again, we go back into that time to fill problem, because the hiring managers get more and more frustrated. They want it filled yesterday. And again, if you're trying to convince female candidates, we know that it takes, sort of 4 to 5 calls to attract a female who might be a passive job seeker to actually look at a role. So again, that urgency just creates that sort of unfavorable recruitment process as a whole. And I think another issue is unrealistic expectations. I think firms feel that because more candidates should be looking, we hear that, the stat of, a 30% increase in people looking for jobs. Well, therefore, if I have a wish list of 10 things, I surely should get my wish list of 10 things, especially if I'm going to be spending all this money on the agency and also on the candidate as well. And so I think sometimes that lack of flexibility around what a company's actually looking for, and it narrows the search. It makes, you can end up discounting some really strong female diverse talent out there in the market by making the requirements too narrow. So again, I think, for any sort of recruiters on this call, or any hiring managers, just think around, what the actual requirement, what the skill set is that you really need. Could it be more junior? Could it be a job share? Does it always have to be permanent? And do you absolutely need all those, all those skills for the role? And as Tracy sort of said earlier, candidate priorities have changed. Frequently the number of women that we're speaking to that go, I just don't feel that traditional financial services firms are family friendly, female friendly, career friendly for female candidates. That's a big consideration at the moment. So I think, definitely from the conversations we've had, female candidates and candidates as a whole are more interested in smaller boutique firms with stronger family values at the center of the firm's culture. They're saying to us, I'd rather look at maybe a fintech, or a sort of an online payments firm, because actually I almost see that culture more like a Google, sort of more open to change, more open to sort of diversity of thought, which I think is really important. So that's definitely a good thing for everyone on this call. And then I think just in terms of, what can be done to combat this, and Tracy, Mark and I were discussing this earlier. Unfortunately, it's nothing new. I don't think any of us are here to sort of, give you sort of these brand new ideas that no one's ever heard of. But I think going back to basics on how to hire women, when it was quieter, we were all able to take a bit more time to think about, right, what are we doing? How are we going to achieve the sort of gender balance? So, whilst the culture side is really important, I think things like being really transparent around flexible working policies is really important. Firms that put it on their job specs, they put it on their website, they tend to find it's easier to hire women and working parents than those that don't. Again, anecdotally, we've had sort of a number of female candidates say to us, well, I've never asked about flexible working pre-pandemic. I didn't feel comfortable. I thought it would be detrimental to my application. And now we're seeing firms start to return to office. And again, a few firms that were sort of like, oh, it'll be, 2 to 3 days at home. They seem to be going quite hard on the sort of 4 to 5 again. And I think candidates just feel, you're trying to return to the way things were, and that doesn't work for me. So I'm not going to apply, or it's not of interest. We ran a survey last year with 500 candidates in asset management across all areas of the business, both male and female. And we asked the question, if you were offered a job and there wasn't flexible working possible, would you turn it down? And 63% of participants said yes. And out of that 63%, 85% of those were women. And so again, it's not hugely surprising that it is a big consideration, for candidates. Things like flexibility around the role, as I mentioned earlier, does it have to be a certain level? Could you look at a more junior option, coach and mentor them, into the role for the future? Again, it's just that pipelining talent for the future. And then more inclusive recruitment practices, things like having a more diverse network for sourcing talent, like Mark was mentioning earlier. The language you use on CVs, is it really male biased? You might not think it is, but actually there are buzzwords. We know there are buzzwords, sort of dynamic, enthusiastic. It puts women off because it is more male centric, words that are being used there. Can you encourage the business to use blind CVs if you think there are certain teams that have an issue around, sort of hiring a more diverse candidate? Is it an idea to go down that route? Stating what flexible working policies and support policies you have at HR interview, just make it part of the process rather than the candidate having to ask. And being open about salary bands in the interview process. Women won't negotiate salaries. We know they don't. They don't feel comfortable. They feel it's pushy and too demanding. Men will always negotiate a salary at a higher starting point. So again, it puts women on a lower footing already at the beginning of the process. As I mentioned in my bio as well, I am a true believer in hiring returners. So again, is that something that your firm has explored? Is it something that could be a possibility? It doesn't have to be a returnship, a full program. It could be, actually, we've got these roles where we could look at that. It doesn't have to be sort of a big program that you run out as a business. It could just be 1 or 2 roles that you hire, with assisted returning. So, maybe doubling up with like a coach to make sure that that returner is assimilated into the industry and into the firm in the right way, and that they're really set up for success. And finally, data. I think there is a lot more data out there to be used. And I think we all know that if you don't measure it, it won't be done. So we are seeing more firms being more vocal about their gender and ethnicity targets, which I think is a really positive move. But if you don't measure it, nothing will ever change. So, looking at data at every stage of the process, looking at what you have in your business now, where are your gaps, identifying that, and then partnering with a diverse network to try and bring a bit more change into your industry, and actually looking at what works well and sort of, really scrutinizing that internally. And, as we sort of talked about earlier, I think, once you find this amazing talent, it's really important, and I think more important than ever before, that firms are really, really pushing the retention piece. What are you doing to retain, the strong talent that you have internally, be it female, whatever it is, what are you doing to really make sure that they're set up for success? So are you identifying people that you think might go on maternity leave? Are you giving them pre-maternity coaching? Are you giving your managers pre-maternity coaching to sort of discuss what the role might look like to bring that person back in? do you have flexible, sort of flexible working arrangements? Do you also have shared paternity or shared parental leave? Are you putting people into sort of networking programs as well, stamping out bad culture and unconscious bias? All these things, go to sort of retaining people in this market where, they have so many opportunities thrown at them. So, yeah.
It's interesting, Kirsty, because one of the things that statistics that I was looking at was around retention for using technology. So I think, again, over the pandemic, where people have been working remotely, it's been highlighted where the technology that those individuals have isn't actually fit for purpose. So they're not able to do their job as well because, to actually get the technology into their home. So, that there is a massive piece around retention. The other thing that I'm really, I'm with you on, Kirsty, is that capability versus experience. And, in terms of where we have had, so I think what we should try and do as well is to celebrate the positives in this. So as well, because we all know it's tough and there's some things that we can see glaringly that need to change, but equally we've got examples of where our clients have embraced some of this stuff. It's really made a difference. So when a couple of my clients have recruitment processes where they bring in they grow their own talent, basically. So, there are pockets of financial services industry where historically there aren't female candidates with experience. There just aren't. And they tend to be, but not exclusively, front office sales roles where a network is required. Mm-hmm. And I have so many clients who say that they absolutely are willing to recruit on capability rather than experience until I find a candidate that's got capability but no experience. Because the danger is, if you've got a candidate with capability but no experience, it takes longer for them to get to that bit where they're income generating, which is, what a business developer needs to do. But the reality is it probably takes 6 months longer. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's probably 12 months to bed somebody in who's got a network, and it probably takes 18 months to do it if that person has got the capability of doing it but doesn't have the relevant network or experience. So some of the clients that are really good at this and they tend to retain their staff is where they bring them in as junior. Mm-hmm. And I don't like the terminology one little bit, but they call them bag carriers. So they double up with an experienced business developer. They learn the ropes, they share the networks, and those organisations are really flourishing. And they retain the people because it's demonstrating that they care about what a career looks like. And the other one, which I absolutely, and I'm working with a client at the moment that does this, and it's been a bit difficult for me to do it because it's that they operate blind CV, and actually having a blind CV is easy, but then my précis with my email sometimes gives it away because you have to say they, there, and so the CV is brilliant and you can't actually tell. And it's not just about ethnicity or gender, it's about demographics as well. So you've got to be careful about what you don't want it to be oh look, they went to Oxford or Cambridge. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? Because unconscious bias is unconscious bias regardless of what diversity is. But with working with this client who have got this policy has been brilliant. It has been really, really good. And the other client that I think get this right, and it's big bank, they have a policy where if I don't provide a diverse shortlist, they won't accept any of my candidates. Sharpens my pencil big time, because they're not saying.
So I'm going to just interrupt there. Does that really work? Because you said before that in some of the roles there are just no female candidates out there, which you can argue with. There may be some, but actually, what you're doing is if you've got to put forward a 50-50 candidate list, you end up, if you're not careful, with cannon fodder.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Mark, because it's about kind of the quality of the recruiter. Sorry, just blame me on jumping there. So literally, what having this client in particular are doing it for the right reasons, and therefore we've got a longer time to hire, because there's a recognition that there will be female candidates out there, but they'll take longer to source for all the reasons that Kirsty and yourself have said already. But what so that it would only work if you've given a longer time to hire. If you are put on a call with 5 other recruitment companies, and it's fastest finger first, we're all going to just do the low hanging fruit, aren't we? We're all
Tracy, how that works with us, how it works, and then how it doesn't work. How it works, if we're invited to be involved in a hire, we'll go out. Through our community, we probably already have got contact with, and quite often there's only 6 women in the marketplace who meet the criteria, but we already know them through our community because they're members of our community. If we can get to them first, if we can sell the client's value proposition, the good reasons why they should be interested in looking at this opportunity, then it works. So if we've got that time and that ability to go and do that, we get a great balanced shortlist. And we never take these roles on anymore. If we're being invited into a process where the client has already advertised the role internally and couldn't find any candidates, has already advertised it on LinkedIn, on their website, and through their internal teams gone out to market, and then they can't find any candidates of any gender, and then suddenly you're invited into a process where there are 5 other recruiters there and it's fastest finger, it doesn't work. You can't find diverse candidates in that type of instance, because what we've found is those fast fingers have already ruined and got to those 6 women, and put them off.
I don't disagree with any of that, Mark, at all. And sorry, go on, Kirsty.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's, as both of you sort of said, I think sometimes it's about working out what you're looking for and then the best strategy for that. So I get that not every client can go more junior on a role. I totally understand that. So I think sometimes it's like, are we going to go straight out and retain this with one agency? Because if they tell us what you're looking for doesn't exist at this level, or it does, but it's only these people and they recently moved, or they won't consider you for whatever reason, then I think it allows you to put together a strategy or a balanced shortlist that is actually quality, maybe at a more junior level. I think it sort of leads into what you were saying earlier, Tracy, in that I think there's this real sort of danger sometimes of just falling straight back into the way we've always done things and never trying to, and I always think this to myself, what is the worst that will happen if you make a random hire that doesn't have any sort of network or sales experience and they don't work out after 9 months? Is that actually any different than hiring somebody who has done the role but then they just move again after 12 months for more money? You're surely in exactly the same position. I always just think that, what is the worst that could happen? Or you've had the role live for sort of 6 months and then you're waiting for your unicorn candidate that's sitting on a 3 to 6 month notice period. So you're actually still waiting the same length of time that it would have taken you to upskill someone. So I think there are different ways of looking at it. You can either try and retain a firm to sort of go out and really map the market and do the deep dive stuff and come back with the sort of the industry intel that you obviously pay for in a retained search, or you try and look and do something different. And again, I'm a firm believer of what is the worst that could happen.
Kirsty, something different, and I'll just drop for everybody into the chat, is a diversity project case study on how we work with Janice Henderson. And they come to us with roles where there is an intention and a strong desire to find diverse candidates, and give us the time and the budget and the opportunity to attract those diverse candidates before they start going and looking for their male colleagues. Caroline, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it was just a comment really from a kind of SME perspective in terms of being the size that we are, payment servicer, sub 50 employees, just on the comment Kirsty made up, what's the worst that can happen? Bad hires for me mean 4 or 5 members of my small team being distracted onboarding that person for 3 or 4 months, and we lose massive amounts of momentum. And that it's a really interesting struggle that we have in terms of taking the time to make hires. And then making sure that they're people that really fit from a cultural perspective. Because if they don't, we've lost an enormous amount of momentum. We're a fast growth company. We're doubling in size almost every quarter. I think on the flip side of that, though, I would say our team are incredibly undiverse because we're all women. Because we're always getting, but we always
I'm actually really happy to hear that.
We offer that kind of warm, fuzzy, we do the whole kind of, if you join, you've got to be part of the team, you've got to fit culturally, because if you don't fit culturally, you're going to leave, and if you leave, you take all of our time up.
I know,
but we're also becoming a bit of a problem in the other direction, because I'm very conscious that we've got no lads in the room, which means and we're getting a bit comfortable, there's a comfortable that there isn't someone stood there going, come on, let's do this, let's get on.
Caroline, for the last 20 years, I've worked with an entirely female team at E2W, having come from environments where previously I was working in and for entirely male teams. And I think when you're talking there about building your culture and having people with a cultural fit, well, I think we need to be careful, because what you're then doing is building a monoculture, and getting people in who don't fit into the culture is surely what we're looking for when we're talking about diversity.
What I would also add to that, Caroline, is that your approach to recruitment, I believe, is much more effective than the structured approach. So whilst your outcome is a little bit kind of, you've not got the diversity perhaps you should have, but your essence of how you are approaching this, I think, works better than this structured process, which is all about the client. So where I'm dealing with the clients that are really getting this right, where they don't have retention issues, it is a number of small meetings that are relaxed and informal to get to know the candidate, and for the candidate to get to know the people in the room, and it to be really collaborative rather than this. I mean, there is a place for criteria-based interviewing and all that kind of malarkey, I'm sure, but where the time has been taken to develop that relationship with the candidate is much more likely to thrive, be right for that environment, and be successful, actually. So, whilst you might have not got the outcome you've wanted just yet in terms of your diversity piece, Caroline, I think you're absolutely doing the right thing in terms of how you're doing it.
Mark, can you address the question in the chat?
Cultural add as opposed to cultural fit.
Or can the panel take it? But
yeah,
I think that was addressed to kind of the comment. Was it comment that you or Tracy made?
Yeah. Sorry, and I think it comes back to Caroline's point that actually, if you're only recruiting people because they fit into your culture, that's how we got to this problem to start with, because it was white men recruiting white men. And that that still goes on. What you want to do is invite, is recruit people that add to the culture, that bring more diversity, and then create an inclusive culture that welcomes them in and ensures that they succeed and flourish. Now, if your current environment is 10 white men or 10 white women, it's really difficult to then bring a man or a woman into those environments and ensure they succeed. So, you particularly if Caroline as an SME, you need to make sure you're doing that right from the start, and as you're growing, welcoming people from different cultures and that don't just fit into this existing culture. Make sure the culture is open and broad and welcoming to everybody. So we're currently talking to Fidelity about working with them. And I asked that question, why should our members come and work here? And it's the first time I ever got, because of the values and our expected behaviours, and then a long list of what those values were and what those behaviours were. That gives us then a very strong opportunity to go out and sell the role.
Yeah, I think there's a real scrutiny around ESG, and I don't mean actually from an environmental point of view. I think candidates want to see firms, if your gender pay gap is off, fine, but what are you doing to address that? I think sometimes being honest about challenges within the firm and actually sort of owning up to that, but that sort of transparency of message. And so that is definitely what I'm noticing, is that candidates are much more sort of bought into the sort of value proposition of firms rather than the salary, the bonus, that side of things. As you were saying earlier, Mark, it's not the sort of the hard benefits, oh yeah, you can earn loads of money here. It's actually, what does this company stand for? Have they conducted themselves well in light of the BLM movement? Have they come out and made a statement about how they will do better? So I think that's the thing, is companies that have a really strong CSR sort of mission, ESG sort of statement that holds up on scrutiny. I think that's really, really important as well.
Jennifer, it's 12 o'clock. That hour's gone amazingly quickly, hasn't it?
Wow.
How did that happen? Are there any, I know other people, of course, we're living in this back-to-back Zoom moment. And some of us are living in hybrid environments where we're running from here to there. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer. Are there any questions that we can answer? I know that thank you, Mark and Tracy and Kirsty. The hour has flown by and it's been so interesting. But if there are any questions or comments from everyone who's joined us, I don't want to deny anyone the opportunity. But if we feel that we've come to a natural close, then I can bid everyone a good day. So how do we?
I'm happy to stay on as well, and I'm sure Kirsty and Tracy, everybody just wants a casual water cooler moment chat at the end.
And I guess the other thing is, because this is sometimes we all take time to reflect upon some of the topics that we've discussed. I'm sure the three of us would be happy if you've got any things that crop up into your mind later, if you want to kind of run them through Jennifer, we can try and answer them at any point, or any other kind of help or advice that you guys might need. We're happy to support.
Great.
I greatly appreciate the three of you doing that, and I'm happy to forward all questions and reach out to me. So,
Francis, you turned your camera on just at that right moment. Do you have a question?
You're on mute.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. No, I just thought that was really, really interesting, really fascinating from seeing it from the recruiters' side of things. I've just written down, we're doing a lot right, and so I'm really pleased about that, just from the conversations. But the only question I have really is about salaries. And Kirsty, you did mention it. But I think it's more than just a salary, it's the proposition as well, and the values, and rather than just a big package of benefits. But we've always been a remote working office for 20 years. So this is nothing new to us, the pandemic. So we were sort of quite forward thinking, and we do have guaranteed flexible working for all our employees. And I think it's interesting, we've lost our unique selling point now, because everybody's offering flexible working. Although I'm interested to see whether that, in your opinion, whether that's for the long term, or are, as Kirsty said, people going hard again on getting people back to the office. They might recruit somebody and say, yes, complete flexible working, you could do 2 days at home, 2 days in the office, but now they're saying, no, we want you in the office 3 days, and how that is affecting candidates.
I do apologise. Amazon man came again.
Oh, did you? I love a bit of Zoom. I've banned my dog from the talk today, because he usually bursts in. I would say one of the interesting statistics I have read recently was that candidates and my own experience of working with candidates is that it's much higher up the agenda for a candidate now when you know when we're dealing with a candidate and a potential job opportunity. It's on that, it is a hot topic. You know, what does flexible working look like? And it's not just the number of days in the office, is it? It's just about, you know, and it's a balance, because we were on a Zoom, it was a Treasury Zoom actually a couple of months ago, when a guy from Santander came up with a really good point, which is, in the pandemic, we've lost our rituals, and we need rituals in our lives. We need to have, in order for our brain to function and thrive and grow, and for us to be really successful in what we do, I think something like 85% of what we do has to be a ritual, where we don't, so that our rituals prior to the pandemic were getting up at a certain time, having your breakfast, brushing your teeth, commuting, which and we did that without even thinking, because that then allows our brains to concentrate on the new things that we need to learn. So, you know, so hybrid working isn't just about, well, how many days in the office, it's just, what does a ritual look like? Where can we build around something that happens every Wednesday, or how do we have that continue with that sense of community? What you've just said, Mark, about the water cooler moment, you know, how do we incorporate all those softer things? And that's quite high up on a candidate's agenda. So I think where in my experience, and I'm sure Kirsty and Mark, you'll have your own thoughts on this, but where the clients I have who have been more rigid, I have one client and they've changed completely. So I've got, some clients are geographically quite challenging. You know, that's fine if they're in London, but, you know, I live in the north, and we have clients up in the northeast and kind of in the Scottish borders. And those clients are missing out on talent if they're not prepared to be a bit more flexible in terms of what a working environment looks like, because nobody is keen on doing a horrendous commute to something that's not that accessible these days. So yes, I think, you know, those clients who have come to a hard stop and are wanting to get everybody back in, that they're not always attracting as a diverse pool of candidates as they are some of the clients who are a bit more flexible, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a mix, isn't it? I think I always wanted to work completely remotely, and now I'm thinking, be careful what you wish for, because I don't want to do it anymore. I want to go to work. But again, I was on maternity leave when the pandemic kicked off, so I've been at home for a really, really long time. So I think everyone's situation is different. I think where issues have cropped up, you know, a few clients recruited last year and talked very strongly about how there would be full flexibility, 2 to 3 days in the office and the rest from home, and that they've now completely U-turned. And so for candidates that accepted an offer on that basis now feel obviously duped. Yeah, exactly. And maybe they've moved, so it doesn't work for them. And then equally, I think some people are very happy with sort of a hybrid model. Then, you know, 2 to 3 days or 2 days at home is absolutely fine, and they're happy to do the rest in the office. I think it's just about transparency and honesty. I think if you've said something and then you completely U-turn on that, I can see why people would be unhappy. But again, it still leads into that bigger picture of what are you trying to achieve? Because if you don't care about trying to hire more diverse, you know, candidates, and if you don't care about trying to support working parents, both male and female, then, you know, this is not even a consideration. But I mean, that survey that we ran last year, it was really interesting, but nothing on it was hugely shocking. The only stat that actually I found really interesting was actually more male participants had said, I have rejected an offer on the basis that it wasn't, I've turned stuff down. But then I wonder sometimes if that's the confidence that male candidates have, that, well, it's fine because I'll find something else. You know, I'm happy to negotiate that. I will push for that. Whereas I just don't think female candidates approach their job search. And well, I know they don't approach their job search in that way. So I think everyone's needs are different, but I think it's about identifying that at the beginning of a process and being very honest with the client about what the expectation is. Because again, if you get a candidate through the process who will not do 5 days in the office, and the client saying that that's what they want, well, you know, it's a non-starter really.
Just
Actually, sorry, Tracy, go on.
No, so I'm just looking at the chat, and that's a really good point in the chat. You know, kind of pre-COVID, the workplace rituals were fine for people who are extrovert, but there are some people who, you know, who that wouldn't. So it is about actually creating new routines and rituals, isn't it? I think that's a really good point. Really good point.
I think with my Men for Inclusion hat on and male allies, I think we heard during the course of lockdown, quite rightly, about the additional onuses and challenges that a lot of women were facing with homeschooling, etc., etc. And I just wish there had also been some coverage of male role models who were really enjoying the opportunity to be at home and work within that and be in that domestic environment and enjoy contributing to it, because I think that is so important. I think also to pick up on FT, you've made a couple of comments now which are great, and so FT is a name on the screen, so I'm sure you have a different name. Yeah, I mean, social networks and social bonds. I think, again, with my Men for Inclusion hat on, men have much stronger social bonds, both formal and informal, in the workplace, which gives them a significant advantage. I think when we move to, and we're in a hybrid or a totally working from home environment, some of those social bonds could get broken. And we could create more opportunity for quieter voices, more introverted people to get the opportunity to contribute more if we use the technology properly. And then learn from that and bring it back into the office and start running more inclusive meetings when we get there.
Yeah, agreed. Because I think there was a bit of a worry, wasn't there, last year, that with women predominantly doing the homeschooling and then working remotely, that they were then missing out on those sort of water cooler chat moments where you find out that there's an opportunity going, and then they don't put themselves forward for that because, again, we know how women approach the job search. So it's I think it's about having, what are you using your meeting spaces for? Is it sort of more for sort of strategy and ideas rather than it just being a sort of general catch up? So yeah, interesting times. I don't think we'll ever probably be really clear as to what the pandemic has caused and been a benefit potentially.
There's been quite a lot. It's with everything. There's been some benefits, hasn't there? There's been some things that have been highlighted as a result of the pandemic, which hopefully means that people's working lives can be enhanced. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
FT, you've come up with some interesting questions and observations there. Have you got any thoughts yourself?
Hi everyone. Hello, it's Pfizer.
Pfizer.
Hi, Pfizer.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the creating an inclusive workspace, I think what COVID has done is given us an opportunity really to press the reset button in terms of not just in terms of the approach and the systems and structures and everything we have in place, but actually to think back, how can we actually bring everyone along with us? So for the first time, we have an opportunity perhaps to lend ourselves to the introverts or people perhaps that naturally have been either excluded deliberately or not deliberately because of their nature, the personality, people that work hard, that have other strengths and abilities, perhaps that haven't shone simply because of the working environment and how people interacted and behaved. And I think this gives us a really good opportunity to bring those people together now, in terms of our decision-making processes. Kirsty, you talked about creating a workspace that actually is more collaborative, giving other people the voice to say, this is how the workplace, this is how I best work, this is how I can contribute better. It's a bit challenging because our line managers and our leaders will have to actively listen, we'll have to take on board those feedback and healthy challenges. But I think that's a short-term pain really for where we can get to if we give those diverse outliers, a chance to actually contribute, because they are the untapped talent. We have them internally, we just don't know about them.
Yeah,
Great
So
point.
I couldn't agree more. And a lot of the work that against Men for Inclusion and male allies that we do, it's interesting the number of leaders who we work with who start off by saying, "I treat everybody the same," and
that's the big mistake, Mark.
absolutely,
It's equity, not equality, really.
Yeah, absolutely. The outcomes, or a number of the outcomes of those workshops that we run, are talking about running inclusive meetings, making sure that everybody's got the opportunity to talk and get involved, but also not making assumptions about people because they're quiet, or because of their gender, or because of their background. Making sure you're talking and relating to everybody individually is so important. But then also making sure, if we're talking about distributing, let's call it office housework, whether that's doing the birthday cards or arranging the Christmas party, or just doing those lower value admin type roles. We've all seen it. We're sitting in a meeting and the manager says, "I've got this task, who's going to do it?" Everybody sits on their hands, and then a woman's hand goes up. You've got to sit on your hands more, but the manager has got to recognize that that's going to happen, and that those type of roles have got to be distributed around evenly. Because if it was a career enhancing opportunity rather than an office admin role, you women would be sitting on your hands and all of the men's hands would be up. So recognizing those type of things from a leadership point of view is really important as well. Sorry, something I'm passionate about, as you've probably guessed.
We can tell. It's good. Good. Right. Anything else?
Jennifer, thank you for putting this on. Thank you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thoroughly
Thank you.
enjoyed it.
Nice to meet you all. See you all.
Nice to
Thank
see you,
you.
Frances.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everyone.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Take
Bye.
care.
Now. Bye.
Bye, Pfizer.